All right, guys, let me tell you what this video is and ain't. This is not a magic bullet that I'm going to give you some preset program and you're going to run off into the world thinking you're going to set it on fire and that's a magical program. That's not what this video is about. This video is for the people who want to learn how to set up their Deus, to understand the parameters and settings in heavy iron, and how to master this machine and become, a master user of it and understand of what happens when you change this setting or that setting, and when to change those settings and why to change those settings. It's for the people who want to put the work in. If you don't want to put the work in, you might as well click off and go somewhere else right now. But if you're here to put the work in, stay tuned. It's going to be a long video. There's going to be a ton of information in it, and I'm doing it off the cuff, so it may not be in any particular order, but I hope that it all ties together, and by the end, you have a better understanding of the path that you want to go with the Deus 2 in heavy iron. Deus 2 has different preset programs that are different frequency weighted or running different frequencies high at the high end in the presets. Traditionally, sensitive full tones, and fast are the best iron hunting programs on this because they have the filters. XP has put the filters in those particular programs for heavy iron contamination, and they're running the max frequency bands. Now, I use fast, some people use sensitive, and some people use sensitive full tones. But the principles and the settings that I'm going to show you apply to all three. So whichever one you build your program off of, this will work for you. We're going to go over the silencer. We're going to go over discrimination. We're going to go over reactivity, because those three things tie directly in how you need to set your machine up. And we're going to also try to define the term, what is heavy iron? So I can use that very generically and say, oh, I'm in a carpet of nails, or I'm in heavy iron. And well, we're going to discuss that and try to set some kind of foundation of what I consider heavy iron. And I'm going to try to let you hear the machine and say, this is not heavy iron considered, or this is heavy iron. So we're going to try to define our terms. So when you're out there in the field, just go, oh, yep, that's what Calabash showed me, and this is what I need to do. So this is going to take a little while, and I may ramble on for a few minutes, but I hope by the end of this video, we wrap it all together and put you on your way. So let me get the other cameras rolling. I'll be right back. All right, guys, I've got a set up right here. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to also tell you something, and I'm going to make a disclaimer. I have a DJI wireless mic on this machine, and it does give this machine interference. So you may hear a little sparkiness, but that is not normal ops. And I am in a heavy EMI area, but these wireless mics make this machine have a little bit of EMI chatter going back and forth. So it must be something with the way the frequency of the mics are running. But so for the critics, that's why you'll get a little pop here and there. So we're going to look at silencer first. And I'm going to show you what I got right here on the ground. It's a very simple test. And I'm just going to do the most extreme conditions first, because I want you guys to see what it does. So a high silencer will shut down iron faults. But there's always a trade-off with that. When you do that, it's going to affect your unmasking. When you put it on the lowest silencer, you're going to get the best unmasking. But there's two other settings that all of this is going to tie into. So this is just that particular setting, and we're going to tie it into the other two. So when you come to the high silencer, so we can see that I've got a very simple setup right here. Just for demonstration purposes, I got a big old nail over here and a penny. And we're going to try to show you guys in real time what the silencer setting does. Silencer of 5. Well, even with a silencer 5, it's hitting it. So let's just shut her down a little bit more. We don't want it to hit it at all. And that pretty much did it. So we're going to go back in here and we're going to lower it to its lowest silencer. And let's see what happens. So that's what I wanted you to see. High silencer will cut down on nail spikes and nail faulting, and the lowest silencer will Uh-oh, not good. And the lowest silencer, stupid GoPros, it's voice activated and it's cutting off. The lowest setting on the silencer will unmask the best generally. That's how it's supposed to work with a Deus 2. But where do I suggest you start? A silencer of 2 is a very good starting place. Let's see what it does. I use that underwater sometimes, and I've used it in the past. I've lowered it, raised it, done different things over the time, different times if I've used it, but we see a silencer of 2 hits that very, very well. So I'm going to shut this mic down just for a minute. I got a lot of moving parts this morning. Okay, so a silencer 2 is my suggested spot, but just keep in mind what I just showed you. High silencer cuts down on iron falsing, but you lose your unmasking. The lowest silencer, you guys seen what happened there. And then that middle of the road 2 still had some really good unmasking capabilities, and it'll give you, in your learning curve, a little less iron sparkiness. Now, we've got a silencer of 2, as you guys can see on the screen here. Let's go down and look at reactivity. We're gonna lower the reactivity to the most extreme case, 0. Now, I don't know how this is gonna work, but this is recovery speed. So a higher recovery speed will make the machine react fast when there's multiple targets under the coil to report them back to you, but there's a trade-off of that. The lower recovery speed will give you more depth, and it'll slow the machine down. Let's see what happens. See, the Deus 2 is still fast in 0, so this might not be a tough enough scenario. Let's look at 5. See how fast that is? And let's go back to 0. I'm trying to give you guys an example. It's a little bit smeared like that, but it's more responsive and more accurate when it's high. And when that nail is elevated, the higher recovery speed will unmask generally better than a lower one. So what do I suggest on the Deus 2? Well, I need to talk about what happens here. So a lower recovery speed gives you more depth. A higher recovery speed gives you faster separation, but you lose depth. So where do I say start? Well, in heavy iron contamination, which we're going to define at the end of this video, I would say a 2.5 is a very good place to start because you're still getting great depth. Here's an 8-inch quarter with 3 nails around it. You guys hear that? That is one of the hardest unmasking tests that I have, and other machines really struggle with that. In the Deus, most other machines will only hit it one way. The Deus 2 will hit it both ways, and that's getting good depth at a 2.5 reactivity and good separation. Now, a little side note here while we're teaching. If you're hunting coins out there, you may go down to a 1.5. You may go down to a 0.5. And something else to note here, you would gain depth coin hunting doing that, but something else to note here is I'm dealing with very mild soil. So different mineralizations in soil will also require a different recovery speed. You may not get away with a 0.5 or a 1.5. You may have to have a 2.5 to get the machine more stable and highly mineralized, or 3 possibly reactivity to get it stabilized in a higher mineralized ground. But if your ground is moderate to mild, then these settings will work perfectly. But just that side note, remember that as you go out, where you live and the type soil you have will also affect these settings. Higher reactivity will help with highly mineralized dirt too. We're going to go back into the machine really quick right here, and we're going to look at discrimination. A lower discrimination tied in with a silencer setting, tied in with a reactivity, will give you better unmasking. A higher discrimination tied in with all those 3 settings will kill your unmasking, but it works in a kind of a similar fashion as the way that the silencer does. A higher discrim will help you with some of the iron pops and some of the iron falsing. And we're going to look at some iron fault signals here in just a minute too when we tie all this stuff back together. So let me just show you real quick. the discrimination is at 6.8. That's stock. Let's raise it up to about 10, just to give you a more extreme example. Like I said, this is a video to teach you. You see that? Let's lower it down to 6.4 where I run it sometimes. You see that? So the discrimination, the lower you can go, the better. But you have to put up with a little more junk when you do that. But that all ties back into what I'm going to show you here in just a minute. So discrimination, silencer, and reactivity all tied together. So 2.5, silencer 2, and discrimination 6.8, somewhere in there, is a good starting point. And knowing that these things tie together, the lower you go, it's like this with this machine. The more open that you can run the machine, the better off that you will be. As far as if you're trying to get the most extreme iron unmasking capabilities. Now, with that being said, let's look at a couple of things and we'll be right back. Okay, guys. So Slash has carried my iron off. I had to go track my little iron ring down and my shovel down. And I want to show you something here. I got a little iron ring. I got a little shovel here, like a little spade shovel. And I'm just going to throw them down on the ground and make sure that this mic is on this time, because I didn't have it on and had to use the GoPro audio. But I want you to listen to something. Let me get it opened up to where it faults. And because I want to bring it down to where this thing faults a little bit. You hear that? You say, Calabash, it's giving a good signal on that iron. And Calabash's answer to that is no, it's not. Well, how do I know that? It's beeping. It's beeping. You can hear it, Calabash. Well, this is what comes with time and experience with this machine. That is a very forced signal. It is a not smooth signal. The Deus 2 really gives, let's see if we can get it to, and this is a mass, well, let's just do it on a freestanding target. Here's a nickel. You hear that smoothness off the edge? You hear that roughness? That is a pro tip of the day. Listen for that, learn that, and I don't know how well that a wireless mic can pick that up, but when you have that on the headphones and you know that you're looking, let me throw this down. When you know that you're looking for that different nuance, it will be very apparent. Now, you may want to dig some of these targets and just check them, and that's how I learned, digging them. So, but you'll start to see the contrast in the heavy iron, the good target, the bad target. You know, will you ever get a good target that sounds bad? Yeah, occasionally you will. But you will start to learn and be able to call a very, very high percentage of time before you dig it. Junk target, mass target hiding in iron. Now, the next thing is when we're in the field, we get these big axe heads and guns, and I dig a lot of that stuff, especially when I'm hunting old sites. And as you guys can see here, we got the shovel. And this thing is going to sound off like no tomorrow. Listen. Oh my gosh, Calabash, it's giving no iron buzz. It's sounding off. It's just a great signal. No, it's not. In the headphones, this is what I want you to listen for. Listen again. Nickel. In the headphones, I'm going to cut this off again. In the headphones, you're going to listen for what I call a forced tone. When you get over a big piece of iron, axe head, big old pot iron, now, will you get fooled on some of it with deeper stuff? Yep, and any machine on the market will do that is worth its salt in unmasking in heavy iron. You can get fooled on deeper stuff sometimes, but you even get even better with that. You'll start figuring that aspect out too, to where a higher percentage of time you will know. But what I'm getting at with this piece of particular iron here is it is a force signal. It is not a good signal. So you need to think about that. Put that in your memory bank for a minute. The forced signals, forced. It'll give a solid non-ferrous tone on some of the big iron, but it is very forced. Now, I guess one of the things that I should have talked about is I'm using pitch on my machine. And I want to say this right here real quick. Whether you choose pitch, full tones, 5 tones, 3 tones, and I've said this in my other teaching videos on the Deus too, use the same set of tones. Do not start changing tones. Let me repeat that. Do not start changing tones. You know, you can go out for a day or something, experiment, and see which one that you think you like the best, but don't go out there and spend 8 hours with this 3 tones and then pitch for 8 hours and then full tones, because all you're doing is stunning your learning curve, because each set of tone parameters on the Deus 2, even though pitch is very different, even though 5 tones, 3 tones, etc. may have some similar acting things, it makes the machine behave in a totally different manner, like it's a different machine in each set of tone options. So whichever set of tones that you choose, which I love pitch and heavy iron, I love full tones on this machine. So those are the 2 set tone profiles that I use. But in heavy iron, I use pitch, and I never, ever, ever deviate from using pitch tones in heavy iron, because I've mastered, in my opinion, that set of tones, and I understand the machine very well. So don't be changing settings just to be changing settings. Change them when you need to. Now, I'm going to go try to gather up some nails, and we're going to try to hear what I consider heavy iron versus not so heavy iron, and we'll talk about what to change and the parameters to change then. All right, guys, let's see if we can define what a heavy iron sight sounds like. This sounds like a lot of the colonial and Civil War sites that I hunt. This will be where you find structures that are burned down, or the Civil War camps, or colonial settlements and stuff like that, where there was buildings. It'll sound just like this, and this is considered, in my definition, heavy iron. And it's actually a good example. Hear that high spike coming through? We're using colonial era nails, and like I told you, with the discrimination, the silencer, you see these big heads on these nails? Sometimes they spike, and they do this on all machines. And if it's too much or you're having trouble with it, you can raise the silencer, you can raise the discrimination, and that will cut down on some of that spikes. But remember the trade-off? It kills your unmasking. So, you know, where do you want to go with the Deus 2? I learned it opened up. The Deus 1, I learned opened up in the Deus 2, and that's just how I learned it, because in my mind, learning it that way does not make me have to learn it again. If I shut it and close the filters up to make it easier on my ears, or easier dig or don't dig, then when I open it up and I want to advance further in the unmasking, then I really have to learn it again. So if that makes sense to you guys, so you can choose whichever way. It's your time and your decision, but that's just my philosophy on it. Listen again. That's a heavy iron sight. Now, if you're out and you hit, and then you walk and you hit, that's not considered, you know, if you're swinging and you hit a piece of iron here, dut, a piece of iron over here, dut, a piece of iron over here, dut, you see how far that coil is moving? That's not what I consider a heavy iron sight. When you move the coil, and you move it a foot this way, a foot that way, and you get 2 or 3 signals, that's a pretty heavy iron loaded sight. Now, with that being said, let's talk about what I just said about swinging it over here, getting a piece of iron, swinging it over here, getting a piece of iron. Be mindful that one piece of iron can mask a target. So sometimes you might hit, bam, piece of iron, and you keep moving. Well, sometimes it pays to just kind of scan around that piece of iron because the orientation may mask a non-ferrous target. So keep that in mind. That's a pro tip of the day right there, because I found stuff, hit one piece of iron, slow down and kind of check around it a little bit, especially if the iron's scattered. You may find a target laying in a different orientation, and when you change your coil sweep pattern, you may pick it up, because a DD coil, sometimes in certain, all DD coils from all brands, sometimes certain orientation of the iron may block it one way, but when you turn it, the coil will hit it the other way. So it's kind of like if you grid this way, then turn and grid this way. Same principle there, but if you're just walking the field kind of randomly, not doing the grid thing, when you hit that random piece of iron, turn around it and check the perimeter around it to see if it's masking the target, because a very big iron target like the shovel right here can mask a target a very good distance. And I'm not talking about 2 inches from it. I'm talking about scan out a foot, 14 inches around it if you feel like it's a bigger piece of iron, because the bigger the iron, the more ground that it can, or the more distance it can mask a non-ferrous target from you. So that's something to keep in mind, and that is a pro tip of the day right there. So stay tuned, and we're going to keep on with the lesson. Now, looking at this heavy iron, and we define what heavy iron is. This type of iron right here, I could and would hunt with a 2.5, and after I hunted it with a 2.5, or even first go through, if I determined that it was heavy iron like this, I may raise the reactivity speed to 3. If I'm using the 11-inch coil, I may go even to a 4. I don't ever run a 5 on the Deus 2, but 3 and 4. 4 on more on the 11, but 3 on the 9, and I have run a 4 on the 9 too, because there can be mass targets in an iron situation like this that are that deep. And so depth is not your major concern in that situation, but unmasking is. And one little side note here that I told you guys it's kind of doing this off the cuff, but one side note about raising the reactivity speed with this machine is it shortens the tone. So just keep that in mind. Let's see if we can demo that. I'm going to sweep it on a 0. Give me a minute. I'm going to lower the reactivity to 0. Let me get this mic back cut on. Listen to this target. Notice the coil. Now let's raise the reactivity to the highest setting of 5, same sweep speed. You hear the length of the signal shorten? Well, that does the same thing in iron too. So just keep in mind, remember I talked about not changing settings to just be changing settings? Because even changing the reactivity speed, when I talked about changing tones, will change the behavior of the machine. So if you raise the reactivity speed for like a 2.5 starting out, that's where I would start if I was hunting heavy iron, to a 3 or a 4, just keep in mind that non-ferrous signal is going to shorten because the machine is snapshotting quicker and it's not letting the signal drag out like you did with a lower one. Hence, slower reactivity, deeper the machine. Higher reactivity, the faster that thing will reset, but trade-off, shortened signal, and you got to keep that in mind. So as you're swinging, you're not going to get this long wow signal. You're going to get a duh, and you got to get your ear in tune with that with the faster recovery speed. So wait, I heard something, and go back and investigate. And when you lock in on it, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So that's another pro tip of the day. What else do we have here? Stay tuned. All right, guys, I guess we're going to recap with that. We've got what? Silencer. We've got what? Discrimination. And we got what? Reactivity. All three to tie in directly into one another about how this machine's. Higher what? Reactivity gives you faster separation. Lower reactivity gives you what? Gives you less separation in general, but gives you a longer gated tone. So where do we start? Somewhere in the middle of the road, 2, 2.5, 3 are for the heavy iron, 2.5 for the type iron that I showed you. We've defined what we consider to be heavy iron. Sounds like a machine gun, right? And we also talked about if you have single pieces of iron setting out, do what? Slow down and look around them, because one piece of iron can mask a non-ferrous target. We've talked about reactivity, silencer. What? Higher silencer cuts down on what? The iron spikes that you hear. But it does what? It cuts down on your unmasking. So a good middle of the road silencer to start out with is 2. But as you change that silencer, know that the machine changes and becomes more, it'll become more, you'll get a little more feedback from the iron with a lower silencer on the Deus 2. Now, with that being said, reactivity, silencer, and what else? We've got discrimination. Higher discrimination, what? Cuts down on iron spikes, iron falsing, but what's the trade-off? Remember, it also cuts down on unmasking. So, in theory, if you want the best unmasking, a good silencer setting, a decent a good reactivity setting, and a lowest discrimination that you can stand setting will yield you the best unmasking capabilities out of this machine. And what else did we say? Don't be changing tones. Don't be changing settings just to be changing settings. And what do we remember about the reactivity? Shortens the tone, makes the machine behave different, just as changing the tones over and over again will set you back in the learning process. I am very skilled with this machine, and as I told you, I only use 2 profiles, full tones and pitch. Dang, I'm getting old, guys. See that gray hair right there? Pitch tones. Now, with that being said, I do use the Deus 2 a lot underwater, and that is a square profile, but on land, I use PWM in both sets of those because that's what I know. And square tones are nice, and high squares nice. And whichever one you choose, just stick with it. And, you know, if there's something later on you find out that you don't like about it or you want to change, that's fine. But in that learning curve, you need to stick with those sets of tones that you start with. You need to stick with not changing settings. And here's another thing. Side note. Don't be changing programs either just to be changing programs, because programs react differently too. And maybe I should have said that in the beginning of the video. I know I'm getting a little long-winded here, but I warned you guys that this lesson was going to be quite long. General program behaves a little bit different than fast program. Park program definitely behaves different than fast, sensitive, and sensitive full tones. It just has different nuance to it. So, whichever program, in my opinion, if you're hunting iron, either sensitive full tones, or fast, stick with that program and don't be jumping around changing programs either, because I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the video. That is that they act differently. General program has different filters. Actually, general program is a pro tip of the day, a very good modern trash program. With that being said, I don't hunt iron so much. Now, if the ground is saturated and wet, general program would be utilized. I would utilize that in a heavy iron patched in, and I have. Another pro tip of the day. There's a lot of information on this machine, right? But don't be overwhelmed. Pick you a program, sensitive full tones or fast. Build off of that. Remember, get your reactivity about a 2.5, silencer about a 2. Get your discrim 6.8, 6.4. Get your iron volume set to where you're comfortable with it. And here's another one of those things, iron volume. Set it where you can hear the iron buzz comfortably, because that will give you information off of the iron. And maybe I should interject that even closer to the beginning of the video, because I don't know how many of you, hey, any of you guys that see me say 1, 2, 3, can you post that in the comments below? I saw you say 1, 2, 3. That'll let me know how many people actually watch this video towards the end. 1, 2, 3. I saw you. But with that being said, yeah, don't change programs so much. Don't change tones. But we're going to end it with that. I hope that gives you a good footing, foundation to start building on, because now you know what the silencer does. You've seen it. You know what the reactivity does. We've defined what heavy iron is, so we know where we need to get our reactivity set to hunt that type of iron. With that being said, I hope this helps. Stay tuned. We're going to just do a whole bunch of tutorials on this. There's an exciting update and coil coming for this machine. very, very soon. And, you know, stay tuned to my channel because I'll have some videos up very soon on that. So anyway, have a great day. Happy hunting. Oh, one more thing. How do you like my shirt? I had this made when I started using the Deus one. I don't know, 7 years ago, whenever I started with it. Yeah, 7 years ago, Deus one. Had this made down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. So found it in the closet. I said, I'm going to wear that a little bit of nostalgia. You guys have a great day.